Good evening. Noting the presence of a quorum and the time, I'd like to call this meeting of the Department of Public Works Building Committee to order. It's September 24th, 2025, 7 p.m., Acton Town Hall. The first item of business normally is to review the minutes. However, the minutes from the previous meeting are not available at this point, so we'll move on from that. And we'll jump right into the new and special business. Presentation of peer review report by Arrow Street. I believe we'll have a presentation online here.
Mr. Chair, joining us from Arrow Street will be Kate Bubrisky and Andrea Brew, and they'll be presenting an update and a final proposal based off of the presentation that was given at the last meeting. And they'll go a little bit further into it, but the comments that were provided from the DPW Building Committee at that last meeting, as well as an alternative option to 4 has been incorporated that Andrea and Kate can go more into detail. So Andrea, I'll leave it to you. If you have any trouble accessing the shared screen, just let me know and I'll give you access.
All right, thank you. Share.
And I'm sorry, before you begin, I did also want to add that Kevin Weeks, our OPM from PMA, is joining us virtually as well. So if we have any questions for PMA, Kevin's available.
Okay, can everyone see the photograph of the building? Hello?
I can see it. I don't know if they can
We
see
can
it.
see that, yes.
Okay, all right. So I believe last
Can
time.
you
Yes?
can you just go to presentation mode on
Yeah.
that?
Okay.
Great.
All right, so I believe when we last met, we had reviewed a series of options. Since that time in August, we have done a cost estimate and pulled together some sort of analysis of all the options to help make a decision. So I wanted to recap. We have option 1, 2, 3, 4A, and 4B. The first one was I'll have a site plan. I have the cost estimate summary on the left for each option, a site plan, and a enlarged plan with some other data. And then at the end, we have some spreadsheets. Pretty exciting. So the first option, just to remind everybody, was taking the Weston and Sampson 40% DD set and trying to do about a 10% reduction in area. And so that's basically, you can kind of see the 40% DD set outline here. We shrunk it. We kept the size of the fleet storage the same size in place. And that came in at a little over 27 million for the construction cost. This is an enlarged plan. So on the left side here, I list the 10% reduction in area. And as I said, maintaining that right-sized fleet storage with 31 trucks. Some of the cons of this are that it has the highest cost per square foot of the options we looked at, and the least cost savings, about a 13.4% project cost reduction from the 40% DD set. I have a little type spelling error, but it also requires temporary relocation of operations and staff. We'll go to the next one. So this option was sort of a baseline option of knowing that it didn't meet any of your needs, but it was something that we had to consider. And that was to renovate the existing building, the existing footprint, stabilizing the structure of the load-bearing CMU walls, doing some, making some of the spaces a little more efficient, updating, I'll go to the next one. Basically keeping the truck storage as is, but saying that you really could only store 12 trucks. We'd be adding a bumper guard, and to avoid having to, continue repairing the CMU wall, we're saying that you could fit 12 plus trucks in here that would be parked on a diagonal. The maintenance area pretty much stays the same, the workshop stay the same, but we did do some upgrades for accessibility, the bathrooms, and sort of trying to tighten up the circulation to make it a little bit more efficient. Some of the cons of this is obviously it doesn't meet the program needs of the department. It's complying with the bare minimums for accessibility and structural upgrades. So we're not triggering the seismic upgrades that would be required by code. And it also requires temporary relocation of staff and operations. Just going back, this was obviously the most economical to do, but it doesn't really make sense because it doesn't meet the needs of the department. Moving on to option 3. So this option is demolishing the current lower portion of the existing building that has the fleet storage and putting in the Weston and Sampson size fleet storage as an addition. There's some cost implications for that, but this partially meets the needs of the department. The operations and staff support and staff areas remain basically the same as they would in option 2, which would be renovated and upgraded. In order to put this building up against this existing building, there's a load-bearing wall that runs down the center, and there are some cost implications and complexity in adding the structure to make this happen.
Excuse me, what was the cost of option 3?
Option 3
I can't read your
is
numbers. 22 million?
22 million for the construction costs. We'll have a comparison later on of all the options.
Okay.
And then we have option 4A and 4B, which are sort of a flip-flop of each other. 4A maintains the existing building, renovates it for the use of staff and operations, and builds a new addition based on the Weston and Sampson design for the fleet storage. And that is about 26.5 million, a little over that. By doing this, you actually get more space than was shown in the program that Weston and Sampson used. You're right-sizing the maintenance shop with 4 bays, but you get, extra area for growth for staff support and admin. And the workshops are about the same size as what Weston and Sampson had, which is shown here. One thing to point out with this option is that you'll have this nice new building for the trucks, but in the end, you'll still have, even though we're insulating this building and doing all new electric heating and cooling systems, it'll still be less energy efficient than a new building. So on the other side of that, with 4B, we keep the existing building but repurpose it for a double version of the fleet storage. So the bottom half is currently used for fleet storage, but the northern half would be gutted and turned into there'd be 9 spaces for trucks on each side of this load-bearing wall. The structural engineer said that openings could be put into this load-bearing wall, but about 1/3 of it would need to, so you could do like post and beams and take out the center wall. But about 1/3 to half of that length would have to have brace frames for lateral support. And then what I'm showing here is the new building for the maintenance shops, the workshops, staff support, and admin. And just for simplicity, this is the same shape of building that was shown in option 1. This is an enlarged version. So the truck storage would not be met in terms of the amount of trucks. It would be 18 versus 31. And there's limited openings in order to be able to maneuver trucks back and forth from one side to the other. I do want to point out that this aisle width is wider than what was shown in the Weston and Sampson Fleet Storage Building, and that's just by nature of this being a wider bay that is existing. Let's see. Going back to this site plan, this option does allow the potential for a future, if you had the money to remove this building in the future, this blue dash line is representing that footprint of the Weston and Sampson fleet storage garage that would store 31 vehicles. Another option is to add on to this existing building at either side, but it's sort of limited by the circulation of getting, the trucks into the maintenance shop here and parking. So if that was something that you wanted us to consider, that would take a little more study, a little more detailed study. So I did not show that, but it might be possible. I'm not sure it's worth the cost versus just tearing it down and building a new building. And this is 23.5 million. Whoops, 4A was 26.7 million. So going to some comparisons. Let's see if I can get rid of this. Okay. One thing I want to point out so the yellow highlighted is the Weston and Sampson numbers. So this was what we got from Tom, which was an estimate dated March 27th for 29.8 million. And the project estimate was about 37 million. What we did was we added about a 6% escalation to that cost to make it align with the escalation that we've assumed for options 1 through 4B. So we're comparing apples to apples. And down at the bottom here, I explained that the 6% escalation is assuming a construction start of August 27th. And we've also based the project estimates for the options on 125% of the construction estimate, which appears is what was done in the estimate for the Weston and Sampson project. So I'll continue if there are any other questions. let's see if I can zoom in here. So this is just an area comparison. There's lots of comparisons that can be made. But this is showing on the far right column, a 9% reduction. It was about, we tried to get it to 10%, from the DD set, but it's around 9%. Option 3 has a significant, reduction. And option 4B also has a reduction, in terms of the area and scope, from the DD set. And then just shows, where areas were taken out. You'll note that we weren't able to get a wash station in, but there are some options that allow for it in the future. So now we have this, looks complicated, so I'll try to talk you all through it, but again, in the yellow is the Weston and Sampson set, and if it has a score of 5, that means it's meeting the needs. A 0 means it doesn't meet the needs at all, and then 1, 2, 3, or 4 variations of that. And we broke it into different categories based on the cost, the program in terms of if it included the program or it included some of the program, but it was reduced in area. And then site issues such as parking, circulation in terms of the vehicles being able to maneuver around the site, as well as separation between the public parking and visitors versus the staff parking. And then lastly, and then abutter impacts, operations shielded. I can just go back and give an example of that. Where did it go? For example, we're considering this option 4B as operation shielded, meaning the noises coming from the workshops and the maintenance bays is shielded from the residents and access along Forest Road. An example of that where that's not happening would be this one, where the maintenance and the workshops are staying where they are, so noise would still be a concern to abutters. Okay. And then the last category was scheduling and phasing, with a cost being attributed to that, whether, as I mentioned before, relocations would have to happen, or it could be phased so that staff or operations could be continuous during construction in some manner. So, whoops, I jumped ahead. Okay, so given that, we have these scores at the bottom. 55 was the baseline of the Weston and Sampson project. Option 1 has a high score. Option 4A and 4B also have high scores. So we are going to focus on those 3 as being the most viable options to consider. And again, you can see the costs here with the Weston and Sampson project, with the escalation now at a little over 39 million. Option 1, a little over 34 million. Option 4A, 33, and option 4B, 29 million. And we color coded these with green being a positive, red being a negative. And these whoops, I need to go back one second. Yeah. So we think option 4 is the most promising. It has the most green. The only negatives are that the wash station, and maybe with further study and design, there might be a way to fit that in. But otherwise, it meets most of the criteria. While its price or cost was higher than 4B, it, in the end, meets more of your needs, and it's about 6 million less than the 40% DD set.
I'll just point out what Andrea mentioned earlier about this option for A, which has the bulk of the continuously occupied spaces in the existing building. We, didn't own a full new insulated, not new, but existing facade with a full insulation and new windows. That is not part of that. So the energy use will, be higher with this particular project if, that high energy use component is in the existing building. Whereas on 4B, the high energy use is the new building. And so, that will be able to be a more efficient building because it'll have a new envelope. So that is the only other caveat that isn't exactly represented here because it's not one of the particular line items.
And that is it. So I think after discussion tonight and comments and input, we will put together a final report with some backup of all this. We have done other analysis that we'll include, but this is a summary.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for questions from the panel. Greg?
Before I get to questions, I'd like to make a comment, and I don't know if I direct this to Andrea or all of Arrow Street. Either way, thank you. This is comprehensive. This gives us soup to nuts. We may still end up debating which option different boards and committees or different individuals may prefer. But the good news is we're going to all be arguing from the same set of data and the same set of options. And what you have done successfully is give us basically the outline for each of those various options plus the pros and cons. So thank you. That's a Herculean effort. But I think you've just cleaned the Aegean stables. Thank you. Now, questions. What assumptions, if any, have you made about tariffs, particularly on steel or other construction materials?
Not sure how to answer that, except if it's
Sorry, you
part
broke,
of
you broke up
escalation.
there a bit. That was a question about tariffs?
Yeah,
Ah, okay.
if we considered it.
I don't believe we had it in the estimate as a line item. It's really hard to track at this point because it seems to be fluctuating regularly. I think if it were a number, typically what we're seeing is putting a contingency down, much like you would do for escalation or other efforts. And you could say, okay, we would like to, in all options, carry some percentage of the superstructure as a contingency against potential tariffs. But I think right now we'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure PMNC has not carried it as a potential future escalation number.
No, I mean, we're using escalation to 2027. Currently with our bids, we're not seeing escalation, or sorry, tariff impacts. I don't think anybody wants to guess as what's going to happen 2 years from now. So there isn't a specific contingency built in right now.
Okay.
There is just the escalation.
Thank you.
Design and estimated contingency of 15%.
Thank you. Other questions? Other members of the panel? Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Andrea, Kate, and Larry. We've discussed your work before, and I think that this is a great analysis of what's been done and a great preview of what could be done with the current space with a little bit of refocusing on how we approach this. Some of the questions I have are associated with 4A and 4B. You had noted on the last slide in the recommendations focusing for the highest three scores, which were, or highest four scores, which were the current design, the 40% DD with further reductions, and then 4A and 4B. And in 4A and 4B, you had mentioned that those two options could be phased for construction, for obvious reasons, of course. We can't abandon the current structure while one's being built and no place to put staff. If we were to take the option that we were looking at in the original design for this project, which would be relocating staff and operations from this site completely, do you estimate a savings in eliminating that phased approach for construction? And that may be a difficult question to ask because there may not be numbers attached to that. But from a theoretical standpoint, if we were to eliminate the phasing and just give this entire site to a GC while relocating operations, would we see a savings?
I'm not sure.
Happy to jump in there unless you
Yeah.
have some thoughts on that. So I would say that while it is a phasing approach, they are, both 4A and 4B are separate buildings. So it's like you're constructing half the building and then flipping over to the other half of the same building. So there isn't that complexity. I think where you could potentially see savings by not doing it as phases is that there's more site logistics space, lay down space. I think that they probably still would be potentially constructing one and then they're doing the reno. But there could be savings from not having to have operations happening on the site and therefore being constrained as to the construction zone, if you will. I think there's potential savings there for that. I think that's sort of the phasing part of this. It has potentially a cost to it, but I don't know that it would be significant.
Thank you for that. One other question. In part of the original design, there were geothermal wells included in the project. And with options 4A and 4B, will there be any impacts to the geothermal well fields that were proposed in that design?
Oh, you mean in terms of the location, the physical location?
Correct.
I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty
We
sure.
carried a heat pump system, right? We didn't carry the grounds.
Yeah, the air source.
Right. Yeah. So we carried a air source system for those options. So there is no ground source system in that estimate. We used an air source heat pump system.
So you'd have to, our numbers, you'd have to add to that if you wanted to do geothermal.
Right. We didn't price a geothermal ground source system
Oh, I thought
for
we had
those
taken out
options.
the geothermal.
Will the analysis from an air source system for 4A and 4B be included in the final report to see how that was calculated and
Yes.
chosen? Okay.
Yes, we didn't do any energy assessment studies. We just did a system narrative. And not us, so the mechanical engineer did that, but.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had. I think that there are some really creative approaches here. While we're not going to get exactly what was designed in the original construction design, I think what we're seeing here are some alternatives that would still accomplish a lot of the things that were outlined as needs in previous studies in the conceptual design and design development effort. And I think that Arrow Street's done a great job in providing us with some options. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other questions from other members of the panel? Greg?
I totally understand why you decided to blank out options, I guess it was 2 and 3, to narrow down your 5 options to 3 options. Can you, in your follow-up material, provide more information on that step? Because there are colleagues of mine on the Finance Committee who have already articulated that they were much more comfortable down at the 10 to 12 million cost level, and they're going to want to see the step between your outlining, here's the option, and oh, by the way, we're going to narrow it down. They're going to want to understand that's probably going to be one of the things that more information will be asked for.
Yes, Tom?
I just want to note one thing for the committee, the handouts that we have in front of us. On page 8 at the bottom, you'll notice under option 4A, the total for construction is not listed. That's shown on page 12. That's $26,689,006 as was presented. But just a note on page 8, that's the total that's missing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you had shared that draft before, the other differences are some of the scores.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Ann?
So does this total include the heating? The air source pumping? Air source pumps?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, all of the options, 2, 3, 4A, 4B include air source pump systems. And Andrea was one of the VE options was also to change the ground source. So option 1
Yes.
also
Was-
change the ground source to a air source heat pump. That was one of the savings that you'll see in option 1.
Correct.
So how?
Yes, Eric?
Yeah, so the options 4A and 4B, I appreciate the use of the existing structure. And the concerns with the existing building include less space for programming, but there are also some for energy efficiency and certainly some for structural concerns. And I'm wondering for the two, 4A and 4B, how much the insulation levels may suffer from, from doing the version 2, option 2, and then also are there ways that, I appreciate that the structural integrity of the building can be firmed up some, but it seems that 4A and 4B, we'd still be passing some of those concerns along the line. Is that fair to say, or?
So with option, and this will be in the backup, with option 4B, let me get the terms right. I think I closed it, but option 4B, that would trigger the seismic upgrades. And option 4A, I guess, has a lower level of renovation and modifications to the exterior envelope structurally that it would not require the seismic upgrades, but it still has a lot of structural reinforcement added that the structural engineer feels confident that it's made safe. But 4B would trigger the seismic upgrades, and that's included in the cost. In terms of the other concerns were the energy usage and the envelope and insulation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so for all the renovation options, 2, 3, 4A, 4B, any of the renovated components of that did not include full upgrade of the envelope in terms of thermal performance and air leakage.
So, okay, he did include some insulation, but I'm just not clear if it was acoustic or thermal,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it was just some spot thermal insulation, but it was not holistic and it wasn't upgrading the windows or replacing the roof.
Right, correct, yep.
Understood, thank you.
Other thoughts, questions? We'll open it up to the public.
Alyssa Nichols, Select Board. Thank you so much for all of this work. I really appreciate it. Mr. Chair, could we have a reminder for those of us who can't remember back to August? What were the criteria? Because I heard a lot of mention of this met all of the criteria. We took out this option because it didn't. Can you just remind us and also any of public that are listening in?
Sure, I'll kick that to Andrea. Can you
Sure.
review the criteria?
So the criteria was based on the 40% DD set designed by Weston and Sampson. And our goal was to find ways to lower the cost, make it a little more tight, and try to just bring the cost down in general. We met with the Department of Public Works. We got a list of all their program needs. We also reviewed the studies that were done by Weston and Sampson. And so when I refer to criteria, I'm basing it on the 40% design set of Weston and Sampson, and our charge was to find ways to reduce the costs. So given that,
Essentially, it's the program criteria. So the types of spaces, the number of fleet vehicles, the number of bays in the workshop and the other spaces, that essentially was the criteria. It's really the program needs. That's the main piece that we were focused on. We also looked at site criteria, trying to, reduce some of the operations from being towards the roadside, and not every option was able to do that, but that was another criteria that isn't specifically program related.
and then there were sort of code-driven upgrades based on accessibility and structure.
Thank you. David?
Hello, thank you. David Martin. I live on High Street. I'm on the Select Board. Just for the apples-to-apples comparison, did you also remove the geothermal option from option 1?
Yes,
So none of these options have the geothermal. So actually, the cost of option 1 is, if we would do this the same as it was, would be some millions higher if we added the
Correct.
geothermal back. Yeah, understood.
Correct.
Yep. I just wanted to say, I think that 4B is the best option. Personally, I think it's fine to put the equipment in the old building, but I feel like putting the important employee quarters and shops in the old structure, and like it is in 4A, is suboptimal. Plus 4B is a little cheaper, and it includes the seismic upgrades, which I think is an advantage, frankly. So the advantages of 4B, as I see them, excellent employee facilities and shops, more equipment and storage than we have now. There'll be enough storage to keep most of the hydraulics out of the cold in the winter. We could potentially densely pack one side with vehicles for vehicles that are out of season. So it doesn't have to use the parking spaces and aisles. They could be packed in twice a year in there. I also feel like if we needed a shed roof or something, could be built alongside or somewhere on the site for vehicles that keep some vehicles out of precipitation that don't need to be kept out of the cold, right? Just to keep the ice off of them in the winter and stuff, they could be kept under a shed roof, but if they don't have hydraulics and things, they may not need to be kept out of the cold. I also feel that the wide aisles in that the proposed 4B parking structure could be used for storage. In both of the four options, we lose the mezzanine, so we lose a lot of storage. She mentioned that the aisles are quite wide, and the aisles along the load-bearing wall could be used for storage. I did want to ask about the small-scale storage. So in the Weston and Sampson design, there were stairs up from the shops to the mezzanine for storage. And so a question was any small-scale storage included in the shops and the mechanic space? And if not, could some be added to the roof or something, like up those stairs to the roof to a small enclosure for storage?
Let me just find that one. So I'm going to share my screen again. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone see this?
Could
Yes, go
you
ahead.
could you zoom in just a little bit?
Yeah, let me take it off.
Thank you.
Presentation. Okay, so I have in this, this was the program area comparison. Mezzanine storage is included in each of the options, and this is showing you not the locations, but the amount. So 4A is 7,000, 4B had a little less. And I believe this area was in the new building. I think both of these are in the new building, and this one had some in the existing building.
So
So there was taken into account, but yeah, that's something that should be considered.
thank you, that's excellent. Just from my understanding, though, where does this storage go in each of these options? Are we in the 4B scenario, are we adding a mezzanine to the old structure? And in the 4A scenario, is there a mezzanine in the garage that people from the shops would have to walk to get parts?
So this is option, 1 second here. This is option 4A. Just taking the same design as the Weston and Sampson, there was this dashed line here. So everything in this area below was a mezzanine for storage with the stairs at either end. That's the same as the Weston and Sampson design. And then there was the storage that's existing above the existing maintenance bay that could be incorporated in here as well. And then there is also storage above the workshops, again, just taking what was done in the Weston and Sampson project with stairs going up in each workshop. So that's in 4A. And 4B, it's not working now. Let's see. 4B. So again, there's storage back here, storage here, storage above here, above the maintenance shop. And this is basically cutting and pasting from the Weston and Sampson plan. And then I suppose there might be a way to put storage above. I'm not sure about that.
No, what you've told me so far is great. And in that one, actually, I was thinking where I think it was Kate who was saying that the aisles are wide in there, and so the areas along the load-bearing wall could also potentially have some storage.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, thank you very much.
Tom?
Brewster, you've been given permission to talk on Zoom.
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Yes.
That's Brewster Conant, Main Street. I've got a couple questions kind of about O&M and the heating costs. I know that there was some discussion before, with the groundwater heat pumps versus the air source heat pumps. One might have more capital costs, but one might have longer term, operational costs. And you brought it up, at least in one of these scenarios, that you said, well, this will cost more to heat. And I think the analysis would really benefit from some costing of what it will cost to heat this thing. And sort of related to that, is there, an O&M? How long do these new constructions or this each project last before it needs to be replaced? Is there any kind of, oh yeah, well, we can do this, but you're going to have to renovate in X number of years as opposed to X plus Y years for this one? I think we're not getting the full cost of, what would this be cost over 20 years or whatever the lifetime of the building is. And I think it would benefit if we had some of those numbers to be able to really understand the costs.
Peter or Larry, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I guess let's think about it. So usually I think of maintenance and replacement as sort of system by system. And, you think about a roof, it lasts 20 years. Typically, you're wanting your buildings to last about 50 years to the extent you can. And then you're replacing things, air handlers and things are usually about 15 to 20 years. So it's a little hard to say holistically what the replacement period would be. I think, to the extent, and we mentioned a little bit, to the extent we're reusing the existing building, there is going to be money involved with sort of putting that back together in a way that feels or works more holistically than currently, gives you that long-term ability. I think both options 4A and B, you could eventually replace that existing building with new. Option 4B was a little more straightforward, and Andrea mentioned, at some point you might say, well, look, that reconfiguring that existing building and putting trucks in there just doesn't work for us any longer. We can take it down and put up a truck bay that's properly sized. Is a longer term play where you might say, okay, we're going to gain some amount of 10, 15, 20 years out of the existing building, and then beyond that, we would replace it. So I think it's a little more about strategy necessarily than being able to say that that's a determinant factor on how you decide to proceed today.
I guess it still would be helpful, you say a strategy, yeah, you have these different things, but I think you're in a position to sort of say what you just said. In certain circumstances, this will probably be outgrown, or you might come into that, and either there should be a narrative about that, but there should be kind of an apples to apples. Okay, we want to be set for the next 25 years. What's going to happen? And assuming certain things, or saying, geez, like you just said, there's some things that definitely need to be replaced in that period of time. And I think that would be something that would be useful, because if we're going electric here, that's pretty costly, and it's not a trivial number. I think we were looking at numbers for a indoor tennis court and pickleball thing there, and it was kind of daunting, the numbers that they were talking about for their electric bill. And so I don't think it's a trivial thing, and I think it needs to be included. And I'd urge this select board or the committee here to ask for that.
Sure, and that could be a next step in consideration if you were trying to decide between one or the other of the options. Say, okay, what's the life cycle cost analysis for both, and as well, what is the life cycle cost analysis of geothermal versus non-geothermal?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that all of the options have the same systems right now. So, like Larry said, those are all intended to be 50-year buildings, even the renovation components. And they all have the same mechanical system, so they all have the same requirements in terms of when those systems meet their end of life and need to be replaced. But I think, Bruce, what you're looking for is kind of not necessarily that as a differentiator between the options, but what is just the total operational cost of any of these options, as a total cost, and not just the first construction cost.
Yeah, I would agree with you to a certain extent. Is it a determining factor? Would it be so big that you would make other things there? But like I said, in some of those instances, you said this will cost more because there's less insulation because we're not able to do new build and new envelope things there, and we need to know what the consequences of those are. And maybe that's like, oh, yeah, it looks pretty good, but boy, after 20 years, it's not so good.
Okay, thank you, Brewster.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Anything else folks want to explore?
I,
Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that I thought when we got rid of the geothermal wells, the cost of the construction would drop far more dramatically than it has. And the idea of doing the building in two phases, when Sampson and Weston first came in with two phases, we worked hard to get them to do one phase for a cost savings. And I was wondering if you've done that as well. I mean, I thought you were going to come in with something far less expensive than you have come in with.
I guess one of the things to look at, and it was sort of the discussion about option 2 in particular, because that sort of highlights the fact that if you're trying to get as close as you can to the preferred program, as sort of Kate was describing it, your costs are going to start to approach that. There's different strategies to do that. If you say, no, we just want, a building half the size, and we'll somehow figure out how to work it, that would be a different strategy. So option 2, which is substantially less, but is also not giving you the program spaces that the DPW believes they need.
Well, options 1, 2, and 3 are all one phase, pretty much. They're all one building.
Greg?
Yeah, I think the switch from 2 phases to 1 happened after one of the meetings that was held in this room a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I still wasn't on this side of the table, but I spoke based on experience that I had way back in 1980 when we looked at why public construction costs in Massachusetts were so high. And it had to do with the filed sub-bid component of the law, which says there are 18 subcontractors here that will bid on this. And what we found in public construction, examining that back then, was that the reason costs were high is coordinating 18 different subcontractors always meant 2 things. 1, costs went up, and 2, if you looked at why buildings like the library at UMass fell down, it was always when 2 different subcontractors were supposed to have collaborated and didn't. And you could never quite figure out who to blame for those 2 pieces not coming together smoothly. So Since public construction law in Massachusetts is a little different than a lot of other states, a lot of people don't understand that you're herding cats. It's one of the reasons why we have our own, when Mr. Weeks is on this call, that's our guide to herd the cats. But to the extent that the first three options are one phase and options 4A and 4B are two phases, that would be then, the question mark is, what cost does that add, and is there a way to avoid that? It's one of the reasons why I think when we look at the 5 options that you've got here, I know you're skipping options 2 and 3 to get narrowed down, but that's where the debate is very likely to be focused on what are the trade-offs there.
All right, just to offer my opinion on these things, I know there's been support expressed for option 4B. Any of these options, I think, could probably be, and we won't know until we get deeper into design and that sort of thing, but I think under any scenario, we could probably vacate the property. Although 4A and 4B, maybe you could do it in 2 phases. You could also, I don't see that there's anything that's going to prohibit doing it in 1 phase.
That's right.
Specifically, as far as option 4B, I just point out to my colleagues on the committee here that with taking the existing building and changing it in fleet storage, we basically have storage for 18 trucks. And as our highway operations superintendent points out, we've got a winter fleet of over 30 vehicles. So if you look at this renovation and going with 18 trucks as being a possibility, I'd suggest that you seriously consider the fact that this would be a short-term possibility, and in 5 years, you realize that you've really cut yourself short and come back and knock that existing building down and build a new fleet storage building, and 4 to 6% construction cost increase every single year. Doesn't take too long before you've delayed the pain a little bit, but you haven't eliminated it at all. So, frankly, of the options that I'm looking at, I'm kind of intrigued by option 4A, and I'm not looking at the dollars. I'm just looking at the functional and operational issues here. Build that big fleet storage garage, renovate the existing building. As we sit here right now, we're in a renovated building that was first built in 1864. It's been renovated a couple of times. So I think it's not beyond the realm of possibility that, that might be a better option, because it does give you more fleet storage, and I suspect that fleet storage garage on a square foot basis is cheaper than building the new office administration building. So that's just my particular opinion, and I'm sure we're going to be able to debate this until the cows come home. But I think, I just like to offer that you look at each one of the options, and then you go to option 4B and say, okay, yeah, there's only 18 trucks there. And I think that's a major problem and a major time waster. And, you know, we've all seen the videos of trying to Tetris all the vehicles in and out of the existing building, so. Food for thought. Greg? Adam?
In any of these designs where we're building the fleet storage facilities from scratch, where are we putting in wash bays and tight tanks? And if there's none, is it easy just to have a sloping floor in those new buildings to be able to wash the trucks anywhere that they sit and have it go to a sloping drain on the floor and into some sort of tight tank from there?
So, option one, which was a reduced footprint of the Weston and Sampson building, we did not include the wash station in the pricing, but there is room to add it. Option two is what it is. That would have to be a separate structure, and I'm not sure where that would go. Option three is similar to option two. There is no space for the wash storage, but because you're building a new fleet storage, there might be a way to incorporate it in that building. And that would be true for the other options as well, for option 4A and 4B. And 4B, there could be room to add a wash bay at the end of the maintenance shed, but it would affect the parking and some more regrading of
Yeah,
the site.
Just to clarify my thoughts, I was thinking that in a situation where we don't have a specific wash bay and we're already building a new pad for a new fleet building.
Yeah.
Is it legally okay to wash them where they sit and have that go down into some sort of sump and then into a tight tank?
Like legally code-wise?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I could look into it.
I guess specifically what I'm envisioning is that there would be water hookups anywhere along the parking bays that somebody could plug in a hose and a pressure washer and wash a truck in any one of the parking spaces, and they could just
Right.
move.
I mean, I know they do that now, so
Right.
I think it certainly could be designed. The question
Yeah,
is
the
how it's
cost-
conditioned.
Yes, the cost is the collection and treatment of that. So you probably wouldn't want it everywhere. You'd want to isolate that to one specific area. But you could have that drain going into a separate separation from the other ones because of how it needs to be collected and treated.
I think they
Right
have
right now,
that.
the wash station is not part of the cost of any of the options, but
Right.
it could be added in to all of them except for 2 and 3.
I believe that, they currently have that retainage system set up in the existing building. So that could be maintained or improved. The issue was the humidity of the water and how that gets properly conditioned.
Thank you.
And my working assumption is you could put a wall up if you wanted to separate so the spray doesn't go beyond the vehicle you're working on. You know, similar to, you see that frequently in just car washes. There's a separate little bay, but it's pretty much the same structure.
Hey, Greg?
Yeah, if I'm segueing into next steps, you can stop me, but what I think we're beginning to see already is, the good news is you've got us all talking about options 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're all working off a document that we just saw for the first time tonight and probably want to analyze it some more and think about it some more, but it's not just us. And we've got 2 representatives of the select board here, that's good. 3, You know, I keep thinking that you're one of us. You're one of them, too. You're a twofer. Okay, never mind. And I think the only one here currently on the Finance Committee, we have a former colleague, who's going to want to chew on this. And if it stopped there, life would be simple. We then have a town election. If we're going to do any debt exclusion, we're going to have a town meeting, which would require a 2/3 vote. And so when it comes to next steps, one of the things that I would like us to circle back to is there are a lot of people who are going to want to weigh in on this at different steps. This committee, other committees, people who go to town meeting, people who vote in the town election. One of the lessons that I learned from the fellow I visited down in Yarmouth is they did their town meeting before their override, or not their override vote, their debt exclusion vote, because they found that getting a couple hundred people to understand what all these trade-offs meant it was a lot simpler than to explain to a larger group of people, yeah, we thrashed that out, we thought about that option, here was the trade-off, whatever. And so I think at some point, we probably want to think about that larger issue as well.
Yeah, I think we will have an opportunity tonight to discuss a little bit about the logistics of moving ahead with this. I believe, and I'll look to Tom just to confirm this, the discussion we had earlier, I believe that we've got Arrow Street sort of on track to be able to do a presentation to the Select Board on October 6th. And, you know, if we as a committee could come up with support for a particular option tonight, that would simplify things somewhat for the Select Board, but we can discuss whether that's a likely possibility, considering that, you know, we just got this information tonight. I think getting this in front of the Select Board as early as possible with Arrow Street is going to be great. And Select Board theoretically have a slightly higher profile for people skipping Jimmy Kimmel so they can watch us than us. So I think that's I'd like to keep to that timeline, and then if tonight we can't reach a decision as to which option we'd like to support, we can certainly meet after this presentation has been done for the Select Board and the public, just to try to keep this thing moving. I'm a little skeptical that we as a committee could schedule another meeting between now and October 6th and have a meaningful discussion. So, but I think that's sort of the logistics thing, part of it that we've got to thrash out ourselves. I think that so long as we've got the commitment from Arrow Street that they'll be sending us some more information, some more backup, and they'll be ready to present this on October 6th to the Select Board. And then we as a committee can figure out, you know, how we're going to come up with our recommendation. If that, I'll look to Tom because you're in constant contact with Arrow Street and the Select Board.
I think October 6th is in, you know, Andrea, Kate, and Larry, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Arrow Street's on target for that date. The one hesitation I would have today about taking a formal vote with recommendations from the committee is that Corey unexpectedly wasn't able to attend tonight's meeting. And I think it would be beneficial for Corey to be part of that conversation. That being said, if the committee would like to meet next week, we could do that virtually to make it easier on everybody. Or we can meet after the DPW presentation and then give a final report as a committee to the select board on the 20th. But those are some options, and, we could definitely switch around some stuff. And Arrow Street, I'm not sure how flexible you are, if October 6th is the date, or if there's flexibility to go to the 20th if we wanted to have the DPW committee vote by then. But maybe we can have that conversation a little bit more.
I just want to say that having been involved in other construction projects in town before, and once you build something, getting an addition or something else built onto the thing that you've just built is, I would say, impossible. So that gives me pause on 4B and makes me think that 4A, which at least has enough space for the trucks, is the better option. Because to think that if we're going to build 4B at the price that it's coming in, and then think that sometime in the near future, we're going to add more for extra trucks, where I come from, that's called Whistling Dixie. That's why I'm going for 4B.
Thank you. Adam?
That comment brings up another question I have for Arrow Street, which would be in option 4A. If we did renovations on the existing building to make it more office space, and then in the future, it made sense to also make that garage or parking space. I assume the existing shell is still there and you could go in and gut it and turn it back into a garage. Is that true?
You're referring to 4A?
Correct.
Or A, so you would renovate the existing building, convert that into your administrative space, and then someday in the future decide you want to flip that equation again and put it back to fleet storage?
When you say it, it makes it sound like a really bad idea.
Sorry, I was...
When I said it, it just seemed like an eventuality that we might come to. But yeah, the idea would be that if in the future it was more cost feasible to turn it back into garage space, is it a matter of just going in and gutting the office space and it's a cheap garage that's ready to go? Or would it require leveling the building and starting from scratch?
I guess what my question is, what happens to the program in that building?
Yeah, and that would be, again, in the future, if it turned out that, there was additional space available and building office space or obtaining office space somewhere else was easier or better. So I think we can pretty much disregard my thoughts at this point because it just doesn't seem feasible.
Well, it's good to think of everything, though.
I have a question for Arrow Street, just to close on the phasing. None of the designs contemplate the phasing, right? The phasing could be means and methods with the contractor and the DPW. If we said we wanted to build this all in one phase and move the organization off-site during the construction, that doesn't change any of these designs, correct?
Right.
Okay. I also,
Yes, and you'd want to do that before you bid
Right.
out your contractor's work.
right.
Simply so you can say, okay, it's one phase, go at it, or it's two phases, here's the phasing scheme. And frequently, that's what we're having to do is set up the phasing for the contractor as they're getting ready to bid the job.
Right, okay. And while we aren't voting, I also think 4A in attacking the issue with the trucks first, and while we may not want to turn the support building into a maintenance garage later, I think that is easier to renovate or expand upon at a later date and get the trucks covered in the larger scale project now. So while we're not voting today, I do agree with Ann and Dean.
Thank you. Craig?
One of the things that we saw at town meeting was that people thought there was a need for a new DPW building. So that was one of the data points that we got a poll on. The other one was the cost was the reason why people voted no. And that's why your 5 options all came in with different lower costs, one way or another, in different ways, different strategies, different outcomes. So the person who's not voting tonight is not, well, I don't know, maybe we are all taxpayers, so maybe we all represent the taxpayer. Yes? Yeah, yeah, so am I. But one of the realities I think we need to think about is we're looking at this from what does the DPW department need, and that's good. I like needs versus wants. It's a giant step forward. But we also need to, in the back of our mind or in the front of our mind, think about what is the taxpayer willing to pay. And that's then the debate, that's the discussion. And we may vote tonight one way or another. The town boards will weigh in on this, but again, until you address what I think the elephant in the room is, which is the cost here needs to be substantial. I remember when we were bantering at our last meeting, I said 10 and you said 30. And the good news is most of the numbers here come in somewhere between those two. Thank goodness you were listening. Good for you, Arrow Street. But we're not 51% of the voting public or 2/3 plus 1 at town meeting yet. And I think when we look at these, yes, we need to meet as many of the needs of the department as we possibly can. But the trade-off is, are the taxpayers going to support that? And so if you're going to push for a vote tonight, I'm going to probably go for the lower end of the cost spectrum because I think it will have support that is sufficient to get something done, as opposed to going back and going through a second round and discovering, well, they wanted something even cheaper than that.
I wasn't saying that we'd vote tonight. I was just putting my 2 cents in for Dean. I think we made a rather large blunder last time, aside from the, let's forget the finance committee, but a large blunder last time by not having a special town meeting prior to the vote. We got the information from Sampson and Weston on April 11th or something like that. The vote was April 29th and town meeting was that. We cannot do that again. We must start the process of information gathering, giving presentations shortly after the turn of into 26. Make sure that we get a special town meeting prior to a vote and make sure that that town meeting has one article on it, which is this, so we can spend, 3 or 4 hours talking about, I'm sorry, about the DPW building. I mean.
1 hour?
No, she said one article.
Oh,
She doesn't want one article.
She wanted 1 hour.
She was saying, anyhow.
Never mind.
So,
My wife, who is not watching this, she's watching Virgin River, okay, is going to ask me tonight, what did you vote on? And I would like to say, we got a lot of new information and we digested it. But I would also recommend that as you are scheduling visits from Arrow Street, absolutely you should go to the select board first.
yes.
But if you have spare time, can I strongly recommend that you pay a visit to the finance committee? because they're going to want to understand all the complexity here too. And yeah, I'm their representative, and yeah, I will give them a summary. And they will say, thank you, but you didn't ask my question.
Okay. The Finance Committee can come to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. How's that for,
We could do that too.
I think that we shouldn't put too much burden on them. I think that we should move your Finance Committee to just,
All right, so let me throw another complication into all of this. So I would suggest that no matter which option we and the select board ultimately back, that option is going to require a design. So I think, at our May town meeting or our April town meeting, or whenever we have a town meeting and then the vote, it's not going to be for construction cost. It's going to be for design costs of, pick a number. I'll throw $1.5 million out on the table. So that would be something that would be voted on at the Springtown meeting and allow time to have it, to develop the design, come up with a bid package, be more advanced. So I think when we're really talking about the big money, we're probably talking April, May of '27. And then if we get the vote, that fits in nicely with the scenario that Arrow Street's come up with, that assuming construction would start sometime in calendar '27. So I think we're looking for, it's going to be a big lift going back to town meeting and say, hey, remember we spent $1 million designing a building which you guys didn't like, even though you said 2 years ago you liked it? Well, now we need another $1 million, $1.5 million to design a different building and see if you like that one better. But that's what we do. I've had things thrown at me in the past, so I'm not worried about that particularly. But I think that's the timing that we have to understand. So what I'd like to do is, if we could kind of bring some of this to a close so that folks from Arrow Street can move on with their lives, I'd like to know right now is, do we feel Arrow Street should come in to see the select board on October 6th? And then we'll deal with this subsequent to that? Or do you think they should come in to see the select board more like October 20th? And maybe in between now and the 20th, this committee will have a chance to come up with a recommendation. So if we can just try to come to a consensus on that, and then let these folks go home and have supper, and then we can debate some of the other stuff afterwards. Ideas, Tom, you said the sky's the limit. What scenario would you envision?
That's a great question. I think the conversation that continued discussing about the options and committee members' preferences, that if the committee feels strongly one way or the other about taking a vote this evening or not, then a schedule can be built off of that. I think that if the intent of the committee is to provide the select board the same night that Arrow Street gives us updated presentation with the final report, their findings and recommendations, then it may help to ask Arrow Street if they're able to present to the select board on October 20th, and then hold either another building committee meeting, or if the committee feels strongly one way or the other, taking that vote tonight. And if that vote is taken tonight, then the presentation could still occur on October 6th. So I would leave it up to you, Mr. Chair, and the committee on what the preferences are.
All right. What's the feeling of the committee you folks, do you feel you've got enough information to vote for one of these options, or would you like more time? Adam?
I think Corey's opinion, and his opinion, in my opinion, in two ways would be very important to my leaning towards any one of these. And I think I would love to know Corey's opinion on the designs without knowing the costs. And then I'd love his second opinion after he knows the costs to see if it's the same or not. Because in the initial presentation, I really liked 4B. In continued discussion, I really like 4A. And in looking at these things, I really like 3. So I don't have to work in the space and I don't have to manage the folks working in the space, but Corey does.
I
Thank you.
agree. We should wait for Corey.
Okay. All right,
In addition to waiting for Corey,
yeah.
that will allow me to present this to the Finance Committee at their next meeting, which is in early October, and let them digest it. And trust me, you really want to get everybody on board with whatever we end up doing, and that'll be a crucial step.
Okay. So I would say that we will not take a vote on an option tonight. And that would tend to make me think that a presentation of the Select Board on October 20th, if Arrow Street is available, might be good timing. So I guess the question is, for you folks on the screen there, if you would be, I know that you've penciled it in that you're going to be here on October 6th, but could you erase that and possibly be available on the meeting on the 20th, I believe it is?
And,
Yeah,
go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, yes, we are available on the 20th.
Okay, great. All right, so Tom, we'll proceed accordingly. We'll let Arrow Street move on, and then we'll discuss a little bit amongst ourselves about trying to come up with a time for a meeting for just this committee and come up with a recommendation.
All right.
And as you go, just, again, thank you. The Aegean Stables metaphor is very apt. You've cleaned it. You've cleaned it.
Great job, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to hearing how you guys come up with your thoughts.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night. Absolutely. We won't listen, but we'll take your question.
You need to answer, actually. If you can, now that Arrow Street is gone. I have 4 questions. One, I want to confirm that what I heard from Arrow Street is that the renovations of existing building translates into a 50-year building life, not less than that. The second one is, why did they recommend eliminating option 3? I realize it's a 25% reduction in the gross square footage, but it's also about a 25% reduction in cost. And I might not have taken sufficient notes, but my notes say that it meets the program needs. Also in option 3, this is the third question, it looks like the fleet storage is Weston and Sampson's design, so I don't understand why they're saying that that is not an option for including a wash bay in the future. And then my fourth question is, can Arrow Street, before they present to the select board, do some sort of lifetime cost comparison? Because I think that the committees, the select board and the finance committee, and also voters are going to need to see, if we renovate rather than building new and have, proper insulation, a new building envelope, and reduced energy use and also energy costs, what's that going to translate into over the 50-year life of the building? So Brewster's comment reminded me, yeah, that's actually something that people are expecting, especially with our adoption of the fossil fuel-free bylaw.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the problem that we run into with any of these is we can keep coming up with lots of questions, and we'll try to get as many of them answered as possible. But I think a lot of the questions we're not going to have really great answers to until we actually choose an option and actually do the design development, which is that $1.5 million we're looking at. Looking at option 3, and I'd want to see how they scored it. Some of the complications I know that they raised early on, and also in some meetings we had with staff. They're a little skeptical about the idea of tearing down half the existing building and tacking something onto it. So I think that is going to require a great deal more structural analysis to see whether that's possible. One of the other issues you've got with option 3 that's not so great is that you do end up continuing to have a lot of vehicles and equipment that are going to be impacting noise-wise for the folks on Forest Road, because the building will not be shielding Forest Road from the active work area. And finally, I think when we look at the possibility of adding on a wash bay, then we start looking into some questions of how does that impact the site if you tack something on to the end of the building, as far as the site circulation, specifically as far as getting into, and this was talked about quite a bit on the staff level, trying to continue to get trailer dumps into and out of the salt shed. So there's a lot of nuances that have to be evaluated on that. But I think they're all good questions, and we'll certainly try to get the best answers we can. I think the comment they made about how you build a building, you figure you build it for 50 years. That's a new construction. I'm not sure that that's going to apply for taking a 60-year-old building and renovating it. Have you now made it into a, yeah. And there are, this was a less than perfect construction project.
But I still think the 4th question that you asked should be given to Arrow Street.
Which was number 4?
Well, she's going to tell you what number 4 was again, but
So I will say that bit about the 50-year life of the building, I was confirming something that I thought that she said. So, and also your comment that we're sitting in a building that was built in 1860 and it's been renovated twice and it's still standing. The 4th was about the cost of operations, especially heating the building if it's less energy efficient over that lifespan of the building. Because we, heard a lot of demands and requests for that information about the different systems for, this building and also the DPW. Like, let's compare air source and ground source and natural gas. So I feel like even if it's the same heating system, air source heat pump that they have presented in all of these options, because some of it's new construction and some of it's renovating this building and building this new and opposite, that will change the costs over the life of those different options. So I don't know how much more funding we have in our appropriated kitty from town meeting, but if they do have time to do a rough analysis of that, I think that we're only going to hear those requests again.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I just somewhat reiterate that I think that if we do even a rough order cost for operations and ongoing expenses, that new building is going to become much more attractive than you see on the page here. And I know that we've talked a lot about the fours here, but option one, I know it doesn't give as much operational space for a lot of the different programming, but it's it's very similar to this and has an entirely brand-new building. I think there are some major advantages to that we haven't, I don't know if we've thought about them quite about. It seems like another good option we should consider, so, for that constructability, so.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. I would say at this point in the project, it's much more important to compare the life cycle costs between alternatives than it is between heating systems within one alternative, right? So the fact that they've gone with air source heat pumps on all of them, we should know the operating costs for all 5 scenarios or whatever subset of those that we think are considered. So if we're considering 3, 4, and 5, we should do 3, 4, and 5. The trade-offs between, say, air source heat pumps and geothermal can be done later for the alternative we decide to go with, and it can be an option, right? We can decide, it doesn't even really change the design, it just changes the cost. More upfront cost versus less operational cost. So the fuel cost, and the system design can be made later. I think the important thing now is the analysis between the alternatives you're choosing.
Thank you. All right, so I think we've got a path forward for a presentation from Arrow Street and hopefully from us on October 20th, Select Board meeting. So I guess that begs the question of when would you folks like to meet to discuss this a little further? I'm looking at, maybe the week of the 13th of October. At one point we were meeting on Thursday nights, then we've moved to some Wednesday nights. So the 15th or 16th as possible meeting dates, and I expect that, it's going to be mostly deliberation, so it'd be nice to have it in this room, but it's also perfectly acceptable from my point of view if room 9 downstairs is available. We could sit right across the table and thrash it out. Tom, since this is going to require staff support from you, first off, what's that do to your life?
October 15th may be the best date, if that works, but if the preference is the 16th, I can make that work as well. That's a Wednesday, yep. So Wednesday the 15th, if that works for all the members. If not, I can make myself available the 16th. One thing that I'd like to touch on, if I could, just really quickly, because I think some of us would attend that meeting, is a Finance Committee meeting. And that date is October 7th, if I'm mistaken.
They published a new set. The Finance Committee shared a new set of dates last night, and I'd have to go look up the Word document. It was at the end of Scott's presentation. So I know I think it's that week. I think we're meeting Tuesday of that week, but I'd have to double check.
Okay. So the reason why I bring that up is that there was something that, the 14th, so it would be the day before. Thank you. So the reason why I bring that up is that there's a couple opportunities here that I think we could look into. One, we could post this presentation from tonight right onto the DPW Building Committee webpage and update that and get the message out that the presentation's available. And the second option, I think that there is some value in having Arrow Street present to the Finance Committee the day before on the 14th, that if this committee's in agreement, there is some funding that we could execute a change order to their agreement and have them attend on the 14th if they're available. We, of course, as committee members, could attend. I know I would plan on being there, and I'm sure John would plan on being there potentially. So we would have town staff. But if the committee's agreeable, we can have that conversation with Arrow Street and have them attend the Finance Committee as well.
I second that motion.
Yeah, that sounds good. Everybody seems to nod. So let's see if we can make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as what we started out on, probably looking at Wednesday, the 15th, for this committee to meet. And certainly if you want to get a refresher from Arrow Street, if indeed they can make that FinCom meeting, you could certainly attend that one as well.
Then they still do the 20th for the select.
Then it's 20th on the Select Board.
That works for me.
Okay. And then we will have the opportunity to, on the,
So Corey will be there on the 15th.
yes, Corey will be there, hopefully, on the 15th, and we can pick his brain on which one of the options he thinks is most practical. And he'll have a chance to share it with some of his operations people as well between.
Does Corey have this?
We all have that now. The presentation that's in your hands, I received an updated version that was given tonight. That was a draft that was provided earlier. That's been sent to everybody, and that'll be posted online. And once Corey returns, that'll be in his email inbox as well. And we'll touch base with Corey prior to the meeting.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or thoughts? Would anybody like to offer a motion?
Second.
You want this?
Moved and
I
seconded
move
to
that we
adjourn.
adjourn, yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, thank you.